All right, I think we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Cheap Eats session of Smart Living Ballarat for March 2025. Let me just get the slideshow up and running. Thank you for your patience. This session was supposed to be run in person yesterday at Sebastopol Library, but I had a migraine and had to cancel. So apologies. Hopefully everyone got the memo that it was postponed and didn't show up to the library in person. A dog crying in the background, and my head's still a bit funny and my vision is still a bit funny from the migraine. So apologies if I pause at any point. But hopefully this makes for an even better recording that you can watch today. So Smart Living Ballarat is a free monthly workshop that's put on through collaboration between BREAZE and the City of Ballarat. And I am your host, Ellen Burns. And this will be my last Smart Living session hosting for a couple of months. I'm going on maternity leave for a couple of months. I'm 35 weeks pregnant tomorrow, so very exciting. Some of you may know Grace, that volunteers regularly for Smart Living Ballarat. She will be taking the April session. So if you are watching live and you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments on Facebook. I will be checking Facebook as I go to see if there are any questions. But otherwise, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which I'm coming to you today, the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my deepest respects to their elders past and present, and also to any First Nations people that are joining us today. This has been a very highly requested session. I did present this session last year. Unfortunately, the online recording got deleted. So hopefully this can be up for people to watch from here on out. This topic is more relevant than ever. The cost of living is still going up. The cost of food and groceries is still going up. We recently found out in a parliamentary inquiry that the big Australian supermarkets are the most profitable supermarkets in the world, thanks to a parliamentary inquiry asked for by the Greens. And so that's quite revealing in terms of, why are we paying so much for groceries at the moment? And it really comes down a lot to price gouging and the lack of competition in our big supermarkets, unfortunately. So hopefully the tips that I'm giving you today will be useful for you. There's a lot of tips. I do recommend, grab a notepad and a pen if you want to. There's a lot of things that you can do to really slash your grocery bill while still eating well. That is the key, while still eating well. So let's get into it. Now, the first off, I just have to address the fast food is not cheap food. So when we're talking about eating well, we are talking about eating healthy food. I understand that, fast food is great every now and again, usually for convenience, but I just want to show a couple of examples of really the difference that it can make eating out versus eating from home or eating from the supermarkets. So this first example is a bit of a KFC example. You've got the family feast on the left there, $37.95. That might seem like a good deal to you. Feed a family for under $40. But then on the right, I've tried to compare it with like for like, so still with convenience foods that don't require much cooking. The chips there, they do require cooking in an air fryer or a oven, but everything else is grab and go. So, even if we didn't have access to cooking facilities, we can all grab a barbecue chook, potato and mash, coleslaw, a big Pepsi. That all comes under $30, which is a 23%, almost a quarter of the price saving. And worth keeping in mind that that's a kilo of chips as well versus your two large chips. I don't know how much that would end up being, but it wouldn't be a kilo, that's for sure. Then we have a McDonald's comparison. So again, just under $40 for your family meal deal there. Supposed to be for 4 people. And then, look, I don't know who's buying these frozen cheeseburgers, but they exist and they're the convenience option. So I wanted to compare like with like. That's why I've got them there. So 4 of those frozen burgers, a kilo of French fries, a kilo of chicken nuggets, and a big Coke, $27.40. So again, under $30. You're saving almost a third of your money there. And that's just looking at, obviously, the convenience options. It'll be a lot cheaper if you buy some burger buns and some mince. But I wanted to try and compare like with like, just to show you that fast food is not cheap food. It might be cheap in a lot of people's minds, but that's what I'm trying to do today, is just break some of those preconceived ideas. So eat at home when you can. Tip number 1, that was tip number 0. That was just a little extra one for you. Shop smarter. There are so many tips in this section. First one being, don't buy too much. We've all heard, don't go shopping when you're hungry, because you end up buying a lot of stuff that you don't need just because your blood sugar's low and you're feeling peckish. So try not to shop when you're hungry or bored. Meal plan if you can. Write a list, stick to it. Before you go shopping, have a look in your pantry and your fridge and see what you've already got at home. So you're not buying double ups of things. And also you might be able to whip together a meal with very few additional ingredients above what you already have. But it does require looking at what you have before you go. Only buy what you'll use. A lot of the time we can get blinded by, 2-for-1 deals, 3-for-1 deals. It's not a good deal if you don't end up using it and you just end up throwing it away. So do try and only buy what you know that you'll use. The statistics around food waste, and we're going to talk about food waste in a bit in this presentation, but the statistics are that we waste about 30% of the food that we buy. And I'm not talking about production there, I'm talking about just people, households, in a domestic sense. We waste about 30% of the food we buy on average. And, that's staggering statistics. If you thought of it the other way, like, I could save 30% off my food bill, we'd all be really keen to do that. And yet the wastage doesn't seem to kind of register, for a lot of us, or, a lot of the time. Just yesterday, I had to throw out some chicken, unfortunately. I'm going to expose myself here. I threw out some chicken. It was best before yesterday. It was definitely not still good to use. I probably could have taken it back. But yeah, being pregnant, as soon as I opened that packet, that was going straight in the bin. And that was, $16. And not to mention the effort and the time and the packaging and the transport that it went into creating that food. So only buying what we'll use. Freeze it if it turns out, actually, I'm not going to use that in the next couple of days. Put it in the freezer so you can use it later. But the first port of call is not buying it in the first place. And not buying things just because they're discounted if you're not going to be able to use it in time. Shop around, compare and remember prices. Always compare price per kilo. This is one of the things, the law was brought in quite a few years ago now that pretty much every shop has to display the price per kilo on all food items. So it makes it really, really easy to compare the value of different products. A lot of the time we've got a packet of 500 grams and a packet of 400 grams, and it could be really tricky to figure out, or you'd have to get out your calculator, okay, which one's actually better value. Now we've got the price per kilo under all of the tags. It's really, really quick and easy to just have a look and go, oh yeah, that's the better value there. Shop local. There's a really big myth or kind of preconceived notion that farmers markets and local producers and small local businesses are always more expensive. That is not the case. And I've got some examples coming up to show you that in real price per kilo examples. Sometimes packaged goods tend to be a bit more expensive, maybe at farmers markets and IGAs. That'll be because the costs of that kind of business for a very small business are much, much higher. I know that because I ran my own snack food business for 10 years. And there are a lot of factors there, including, economies of scale and packaging and all that kind of thing, that does make it hard sometimes for small businesses to compete with very large manufacturers. Usually, I would say more than 90% of the time, the case is that those small business products are much, much higher quality. So in terms of value, you are often getting what you pay for. But when it comes to budget, we can't always afford the highest quality, and we can't always afford to buy from those small local businesses. But I think you'll find, and I've got some examples coming, with fresh fruit and veg and a lot of those more staple items, it's actually much more affordable and consistent to shop local and to shop from local producers in the farmers market as well. There's not kind of the same fluctuation as there are with big producers of fresh fruit and veg. Also, shop global. Try your Asian and Indian grocers. We've got some great Asian and Indian and international grocers in Ballarat at the moment. There's just been a new one open in Sebass. I haven't made it there yet, but I've heard really good things, really reasonable prices, and a really great range as well. And depending on what you need to buy, say rice, for example, rice is often a lot cheaper at your Asian or Indian grocers than it is in your general supermarket. Same with things like Kewpie or Lao Gong Ma, or some of those international ingredients that you might be buying regularly tend to be quite a lot cheaper when you get them from the international grocers. An anecdote about this was during COVID, when all the shelves were bare, or sold out of rice, sold out of flour, all these things. I went to the Indian grocers and they were 100% stocked up, fully stocked shelves, no panic buying going on there. So remember that, especially for those kinds of products, Asian and Indian grocers and international grocers can sometimes be a way cheaper way to go than your supermarkets. So here is a real life price comparison. And these price comparisons are Ballarat based comparisons. So hyperlocal, and here to really show you that sometimes preconceived kind of ideas of what is cheap, what's the cheapest, are not true. So from here you can see Wilson's had a great special on tomatoes here, $5 a kilo. I worked it out based on the weight of a medium tomato, would be about 60 cents a tomato. Yendon, this is selling at the farmers market, work out to 63 cents each. And these are beautiful tomatoes, by the way, from John at Yendon. Curtis Fresh in Sebass had them at $75 cents each, sorry, and Woolworths 76 cents each. Oh, my photo might be in the way there. So hopefully from that, you can see that the supermarkets are not necessarily the cheapest when it comes to fruit and veg like this. And with this comparison, having tried pretty much all of these tomatoes, I would say that Yendon would be by far the highest quality, grown locally in Yendon. And you can see they're not quite the cheapest there. Wilson's had a really good price on tomatoes when I went in to check, but super, super high quality. So, that's a good example of, there's not a huge price difference between those, but when you add it up, if you're getting 4 or 5 tomatoes, it adds up to $1 quite quickly. So changing slides. Seems to have frozen. That's interesting. Oh, hang on. Let's go back in. So some other price comparisons. Sinclair's Meats in Sebas, amazing butcher. Again, a locally sourced, family-owned business, and they've got some really great meat specials. Often, I'm actually on their text message list, so I get text saying, "Oh, you know, cheap pork roast this week, or cheap chicken breast this week," or whatever it is. And here you can see this massive difference of, I believe that's Woolworths as well. I actually used Woolworths because they had their prices online and Coles didn't. That's why I'm picky on them a bit, but you can, you know, it's quite equivalent, Coles versus Woolworths. So, you know, insert big supermarket here. Their pork boneless leg roast, $9 a kilo. Sinclair's $5 a kilo. And I find that often Sinclair's or IGA, John Harbour, Quality Butcher, one of my favourite butchers, they often have these really, really great specials. So you can kind of, I plan my menu basically around what meat is cheap. I'm a meat eater, and that tends to be the most expensive thing. So I'll go for what's on special and base my meal planning around that. Now, this is also at Sinclair's. Sinclair's do have a pantry range, which you might assume would tend on the more expensive side. As I've said, packaged goods at small businesses can be a little bit more expensive. But as you can see, Meredith's goat's cheese, probably because it's a local supplier and they've got a good relationship with them, $10.99 for a jar compared to $13.80 at the supermarket. So, you know, that's a saving of $3 there. So again, comparing the price per kilo, not making any assumptions of which shops are going to be cheaper, because as we can see, this is a local family-run business and you can get some really, really great deals there. On the flip side, not everything's cheaper. Obviously, I'm just using some examples. So these are also Sinclair's prices. I just wanted to keep it, you know, nice and even so that we can compare. Their beef mince, $13 a kilo. Price dropped beef mince is $11 a kilo at Woolworths. I believe those prices have gone up again now, though. Whole chicken, $15.28 compared to, I compared it to the free range chicken from Woolworths because the chicken at Sinclair's is free range. So I wanted to try and compare like with like. And as you can see, a little bit more expensive, not that much more expensive. You know, the chicken, it's really negligible considering that size 17, you know, I tried to work it out that they were roughly equivalent, but you're only talking a difference of 50 cents there. Farmers market versus supermarket, a classic one where people assume that the farmers market's really expensive. Again, packaged products. These are packaged products, which you would maybe assume are more expensive at the farmers market. Not necessarily. So we've got some chickpeas there from Lena's Naked Pantry, $5.50 a kilo, compared to Woolworths, Mackenzie's, $3.70 a kilo. So a little bit more expensive there. But another thing to consider is that from Lena, they're unpackaged, so you can take your own bags and fill them up, which also means that you can get as many or as little as you need. So if you only need 250 grams for a recipe, you can only, you know, you can just get 250 grams. You don't have to go the kilo. So there are some benefits there as well as the price difference. And then Ballarat Backyard Beekeeping, best honey around, their kilo tubs, $15. Compare that to home brand Woolworths, $12.50 a kilo. Now I can tell you that Backyard beekeeping, their honey is going to be a much, much higher quality. Like, it feels silly to even compare these two products, but I think this home brand is the only honey that you can get in a kilo bucket from the supermarket. But again, these prices are quite equivalent, but the difference in quality, and not to mention, buying from a local business, small local family-owned business, it's a trade-off, and price isn't the only factor when we're shopping, obviously. So some places to shop that I would recommend: Ballarat Farmers Market is the 2nd and 4th Saturdays of every month at Zoo Drive, Lake Wendouree, and you'll find a lot of local businesses there. I've mentioned, Backyard Beekeeping, Naked Pantry, Yendon Tomatoes, Jean Paul Wine, if you like wine. I haven't included that in this presentation, but incredible wine for really, really reasonable prices. Spring Creek's Organics have really great prices as well. One anecdote about Spring Creek is, I don't know if you remember when lettuce went crazy and lettuces just shot up to like $11 a lettuce. For some reason, it might have been after a big storm or weather event or something. And people were just going nuts about these $11 lettuces in the supermarket. Well, the local producers still had lettuces for $3 the whole time. So, that's a good example of that fluctuation that doesn't necessarily affect our local producers. Their prices tend to be a lot more steady. So if something is, going crazy after some strange weather event, check the farmers markets. Bridge Mall Market is the other market we have in Ballarat. That's the 1st Saturday of the month, down at the Bridge Mall, which has just been reopened and revamped. Smythes Creek Farmgate, I believe they are shut at the moment. They're moving closer into town, into Delacombe. Curtis Fresh in Sebass, I love. They have some really great seasonal specials, as well as a very reliable range. Peaches in Wendouree, also really good. They've got a smaller range, but some really, really great prices. Wilson's, classic family-run local business with some really, really great prices as well. Fruit Shack, that's in Wendouree. That's also an Asian grocers. So duck in there to check their prices on pantry stuff as well. Ballarat Whole Foods Collective, I have to mention, they are a not-for-profit. So they are a members-owned co-op. So they can have really, really reasonable prices because they don't actually have a profit margin factored in. They sell all of the products that they sell at the cost that it costs them. So they've got a lot of really great bulk stuff that you can have access to. You do need a membership to shop there, but it's really, really reasonable. I think it might be $50 a year. Check on their website or their Facebook page. They're located in Barclay Square in the BGT building in Ballarat East, and they're open twice a week, Thursdays and Saturdays. So check them out because they also have some really great local products as well. They've got a cold section, they've got bulk dry goods, they've got fresh fruit and veg, all sorts of stuff there. NQR, I love a bit of NQR, especially for packaged stuff, packaged snacks and chips and chocolate and birthday cards, weirdly, dollar birthday cards. A lot of that kind of stuff, some good frozen stuff in their range as well. There's stores in Sebass and Wendouree. You'll notice that a lot of these, there's kind of hotspots in Sebass and Wendouree, really good shopping in both of those areas for affordable groceries. But some of these are spread over Ballarat. Shep Cannery Surplus, right next to NQR in Wendouree on Howard Street there. If you like your canned fruit and tinned spaghetti and baked beans and that kind of thing. Sinclair's Butchers, I've already mentioned. Ballarat Meat Co. is also really, really reasonable in Wendouree. And Ringen's Butcher in Sebass is also really reasonable. I've just found them recently source sausages from them for the Hidden Orchard, my volunteer group, to do a Bunnings sausage sizzle. And they came out really, really reasonable as well. So this is not a complete list. This is just kind of the places that I often shop and recommend you can get really good deals from. And I haven't actually mentioned their IGAs. The closest supermarket to me is an IGA. It's kind of got that juxtaposition where a lot of their packaged stuff can be a little bit more expensive, but their meat, they have really, really great meat specials and fruit and veg as well, and bakery items. So definitely check out your local IGA as well. Always compare the pair. So compare different stores. We've talked about that. Compare different brands. Often home brand are just as good as other brands if you're shopping from the supermarket. Compare smaller and larger pack sizes. Don't always assume that bulk is cheaper. I've got some real life examples of that in a second. And don't assume that a discounted item is the cheapest either. How many times have you seen a yellow sticker or a discounted sticker and you think, oh yeah, great, all right, 40% off, 30% off. And then you look at the price per kilo compared to the product next to it, and it's actually still more expensive. It's just a premium or expensive brand that's been brought down to roughly the same cost as their competitor. So don't just grab something because it has a discounted sticker on it. Still look at the price per kilo, and still think about whether you actually want that product and will actually use that product. Because if you don't end up using it, you've wasted 100% of the money. You haven't saved anything. Compare loose and pre-packaged versions of foods as well. Often you can get unpackaged. Best example for this is mushrooms. The unpackaged ones that you can put in a paper bag are always cheaper than the ones wrapped in plastic. And they're way better because the ones wrapped in plastic, they sweat and they don't last as long and they go a bit funny. And there's a bunch of plastic that you didn't need in your life. So I always get the brown paper bags. It's cheaper, it's better for the environment, it's better for the product, it's better for storage. So that's a good example of that one. And always compare fresh versus canned versus frozen. Now this next slide will show you what I mean by that. This is an example of green beans and the varying prices of which they're available. Now again, these are all from Woolworths. So I'm trying to compare like with like. They're all from the same shop, just in different sections of that shop. And as you can see, fresh, let's go fresh first. Fresh green beans, $8.90 a kilo. So about, $9 a kilo. Going down to sliced beans, these are home brand, $5.60 a kilo. Canned sliced green beans, $4.39 per kilo. Now you see where I'm reading the per kilo price, hopefully, rather than the unit price. It's just underneath. And then your home brand, essentials range, home brand, $2.80 a kilo. Now, usually the difference between the essentials brand and the home brand, let's compare those two frozen products. The home brand will be more regular sizes, so they'll all of them will be this kind of size. The lower price essentials range might be varying sizes, so they might be kind of the offcut, not the offcuts, but they might be a little bit more variable in terms of size, and that's probably why they're a little bit cheaper. Just realized that my battery is not plugged in on my laptop. Excuse me. Make sure this plug in so I don't run out. And what you want to buy here will depend on what you want to use these for. So obviously, if you need fresh raw green beans for something, the only option there is to buy fresh raw green beans. But if you're putting them in something to cook, it might make pretty much no difference in the end to buy frozen or canned. You'll know whether it makes a difference. I personally buy snap frozen green beans because I pretty much always want them for a stir fry or a curry or that kind of thing. It's just a really easy thing to throw in to things. And if you're worried about the sustainability side of things, if you're a kind of a low waste, low plastic kind of person and you feel a bit bad buying frozen veg in plastic, I used to be that way. I used to feel a bit bad. But you will notice that the fresh green beans also come in a plastic bag. It's just not one that you take home with you. So when it comes to taking personal responsibility for our waste output, oftentimes you have to think, what happened to get this product to me in an unpackaged way? Are you just taking fresh green beans out of a plastic bag, maybe putting them in another plastic bag or your brown paper bag that you've stolen from the mushroom section? Is that any different to getting the frozen ones in a plastic bag? Probably not. The other thing there is fresh green beans have to be transported in a really particular way, at a particular speed, and stored in a particular way. Whereas frozen green beans, they're usually snap frozen, so they can actually have a higher nutritional content because they're frozen as soon as they're picked. They're not kind of stored and transported for a few days or a few weeks. They're snap frozen. And they're also transported frozen, which is it's actually a lot easier to transport frozen vegetables than it is to try and keep them all nice and not bruise them and that kind of thing. So there's actually some considerations around transport miles and storage and all of those kinds of things as well. If you're thinking about it in terms of sustainability, remember that there are all these extra factors as well. Another interesting thing is my mother-in-law has a very high reaction to histamines. And so she can a lot of the food that she can eat has to be snap frozen because the longer it's stored, it develops these histamines that her body has a really strong reaction to. And actually all of us have a reaction to histamines. We all have a kind of inflammatory reaction to histamines. Her reaction is just more extreme than most people. So that's another thing to consider as well, is that snap frozen is actually usually quite a lot healthier for you. Got a bit of a protein comparison here. Protein is one of those things that most people center their meals around the protein, which is a good idea. Better to center it around that than your carbs or that kind of thing. But we have these kind of preconceived notions, again, of what is cheap, and they're not always necessarily in line with reality. So these are some comparisons. For example, tuna. People think of tuna as really, really cheap. I've got like the cheapest tuna I could find there, the Essentials range, home brand tuna in spring water. And as you can see, it's $8.24 a kilo. Compare that to a whole chook for $5.50 a kilo. So you can see, you might think of meat or chicken as expensive, but if you're getting a whole chook, it's actually quite cheap. People think of eggs as really cheap, not lately probably, and in fact the price there, that price is probably not current. I think they have spiked recently. There's been some issues with bird flu and that kind of thing. I think eggs are about $14 a kilo at the moment. Still on the cheaper side in terms of protein, because say something like mince, which is probably the next cheapest protein, is generally about $15 a kilo. So eggs and mince probably about on par at the moment. But as you can see, you can get cheaper mince in the form of run-of-the-mill barbecue sausages. You got $7 a kilo there. But a lot of the vegetarian options can be a lot cheaper. So looking at things like chickpeas, $4.50 a kilo. And that will be similar with other kind of pulses like lentils and that kind of thing. So one of the things that I did when I was on a really, really strict food budget was I kind of gave myself rules and ceilings. So I would say things like, okay, I'm not going to pay for anything, any food that's over $8 a kilo, not in my budget. And that might seem quite extreme. I was living on quite a low budget at the time. But as you can see, it still includes a lot of different options. And we saw in a previous slide that it would have included that roast pork as well. That roast pork was $5.50 a kilo. So very frequently you can get proteins on special for around $5–6 a kilo. You can get mince around that price, sometimes $8 a kilo. Certain types of fish you can get around $8 a kilo, often frozen run-of-the-mill bass fillets are about $8 a kilo. So sometimes it's just useful giving yourself a ceiling and budgeting that way, just saying I'm not going to pay anything above $8 a kilo. I should probably mention I do have lived experience with food insecurity. When I first moved out of home and was living at uni, I had a job, but I was transferring from Ballarat to Melbourne. It took them ages to get the transfer happening. So there was at least 6 months where I was living on $10 a week. And by $10 a week, I mean that had to pay for everything beyond rent and bills. So food, travel, entertainment, absolutely everything had to come under $10 a week. This was quite a few years ago now. It was 2008. So obviously prices have completely changed since then. Inflation's gone nuts, but it was extremely challenging. I used to eat pretty much one or two meals a day. There was often free food available at my university, thankfully. And they did things like during study periods, they would have toast night as a kind of break from your nighttime study. 9 p.m. they'd have toast night in the residence halls where I lived, and that would be my dinner. So I'd try and wake up late, have a like brunch kind of meal, and then wait till 9 and have like 12 pieces of toast for my dinner. And even then I was trying to get as much nutrition out of that as possible. So I was eating raisin toast and crumpets or English muffins with peanut butter because I needed some protein and that kind of thing. So I was trying to game the system even back then. But I have that lived experience with food insecurity, and it's taught me a lot of these tips and tricks that have stayed with me for the rest of my life. I'm still, quite budget conscious when it comes to purchasing food. And even though the prices have changed, I do remember that $8 a kilo being my ceiling at the time. And I remember thinking, I'm going to know when I'm financially comfortable when I can buy red capsicums again, because they're $9 a kilo or $8.50 a kilo, unless they're on special. So they were just outside my budget range. So that's just like a funny memory that I have. So, other things that can fit under that $8 per kilo, when you talk about fresh fruit and veg, zucchini, potatoes, onions, pumpkins, a lot of those root vegetables tend to be quite cheap per kilo. In terms of fruit, your $8 a kilo ceiling might cut out blueberries and strawberries and raspberries, but it allows you to buy grapes and apples and plums and all sorts of things when they're in season as well. So that number might change for you, but just throwing it out there that $8 was my ceiling. Buy in bulk. I keep going on about price per kilo, but it's really the key to shopping smarter. Buying in bulk is usually cheaper, not always. And buying things when they're discounted and storing them properly can be a real cost saver. So, for example, if you can afford it, buying a 10, 12, 15 kilo bag of rice and storing it and using it over a really long period of time is a lot cheaper usually than buying a kilo at a time. For example, same with flour, a lot of those basic staples you can get for cheap, sometimes half price. They'll be discounted, those big bags especially, and you can store them and use them for a long time. Join a co-op. I've mentioned Ballarat Whole Foods Collective. So they buy in bulk for you, and then you can buy the smaller amount, but at the bulk price. Or buy with family and friends. You could, if you can't afford to buy something in bulk yourself, you could split the cost with family and friends, especially if they eat kind of the same way as you, or use the same kind of products that you do. Here's some examples where it's not it's not always the case. Everything, nothing can be simple, can it? Just looking at supermarket prices, you've got here a kilo of rice would be $9 for 5 kilos, or 5 kilos for $8.50. So it is a little bit cheaper, but it's not that much cheaper. With rice, I would always recommend to check out your Indian and Asian grocers as well. Here's a funny one that really stood out to me when I saw this, and I checked, and these are still the current prices for these cashews. 400 grams for $8, or 750 grams for $18. And this is one of those ones where if there wasn't the price per kilo on there, it might be tricky to figure out, hang on, what is cheaper? You assume that the bulk packet will be cheaper, but it's actually way cheaper to buy the small packet. This makes no sense to me. I don't know how Woolworths decide their pricing on this, but if you were buying cashews for, a salad or something you only needed a small amount, don't be tempted to buy the big packet just because you assume it's going to be cheaper, because this is not cheaper at all. It's $3 more that's for 700 grams, sorry. Yep. It's $24 for a kilo, and the small packet is $20 a kilo. Big difference. No idea why, but it's just an example that is always worth checking the price. Here are some Coke. Coke is such a classic. Coke prices make absolutely no sense. I'm sure that you've noticed this. A small bottle of Coke is so expensive. This is impossible not to see, because you've got your 600 ml bottle of Coke there for $4.25, and a 1.25 litre for $1.90. But as you can see, even when it's not half price, it's $3.85 for a litre. Sorry. So $3.85 for a litre, or $7.08 for a litre in the smaller bottle. That's just insane. I don't really understand why. Generally, those small bottles are pre-chilled. So I guess if you're wanting a cold drink immediately, you're paying for the temperature of that drink. But it's bizarre. And I think it would actually be cheaper to just go through a drive-through at that point. So I don't know who's buying that, but anyway. And then let's compare butter. These are both home brand equivalent. You've got $8.60 for 500 grams there on the left, and $6.40 for 500 grams on the right. So as you can see, quite a big price difference there. So that's an example of when buying bulk does is cheaper and does make a difference. But hopefully those two photos show you that it's not necessarily always cheaper to go with the bulk, but it's usually pretty obvious when it's not. Usually you're paying for convenience of some kind. So you're either paying for the smaller packet is more convenient, or you're paying for the drink is pre-chilled or something like that. So just be aware of these prices. Okay, big next section, waste less. Andrina online said really interesting points, Ellen. Thank you. Thanks, Andrina. And hello to the people watching live. Again, I am checking the comments. So if you have any questions or comments, please put them on the Facebook post and I'll check them as I'm going. Waste less. I mentioned the stat before that we, on average, throw out about 1/3 of the food that we buy as households. In Ballarat, the waste study that was done a couple of years ago showed, and actually there was a newer one that was done, showed that 42%, the newer one showed 42% of Ballarat residents' landfill bin, so the red lid bin, is food waste. 42% is food waste. Insane. That's just, it's insane. When you think about the money that equates to in people's budgets, it's mind-boggling. And if you could return all of that food that you threw in the bin to the shop and get the refund, just imagine how much money that would be. So one of the biggest things that we should be focusing on is wasting less food. One way to do that is to use absolutely everything. So cook a roast chook, you split the meat off, freeze the bones, make stock out of it. Top and tail your carrots, top and tail your onions, cut off all your celery tops, everything like that. Put them in a bag, wash the definitely celery before you cut them up, but put all those tops and tails in a bag in the freezer. When it's full, get them out, make your own stock. Stock from the supermarket is really expensive and it's not very good quality, whereas we can make our own at home for free, cut down on that food waste, and be making delicious stock to put in soups and stews and everything like that. Nobody should be paying money to buy stock from a shop. Eat the skins. I still see people peeling their carrots and peeling their potatoes before they cook them. I think this was a bit of a kind of sign of the times of maybe my parents' generation, sorry. I don't think people of my generation do this, not as much as I've seen. Most of the nutrition is actually in the skin when it comes to vegetables and things like carrots and potatoes. And there's really no reason to peel them. They're more delicious, the texture is better. You know, roast potatoes, leave the skin on, crisps up, beautiful. It's not the same when you peel them. So stop peeling your vegetables. Eat the stems of herbs and broccoli. I hate when I see people breaking the stem off the broccoli and leaving it in the store. That to me is one of the best parts. I don't really understand it. Treat it in a different way, sure. The stems of herbs generally can be a bit tougher, more chewy, so you don't necessarily want to like pick them off with the leaves and put them on top, but you can cut them up really fine and put them in whatever you're cooking and cook them up. Generally, they have the strongest flavor of the plant, so even stronger than the flavor of the leaves. So don't be throwing out your coriander stalks just because you've picked all the leaves off to use as a pretty garnish. Chop up the stalks and put them in your salsa or whatever you're making. The leaves can be eaten on celery, cauliflower, beetroot. You can be adding these to your salads. Cauliflower, you can roast up the leaves. Same with broccoli, very similar to kale. And there's really no reason to be throwing those out. If the stem of the leaf is a bit tough and woody, just cut off the stem and cut it out and roast the leaves with a bit of oil and salt. Delicious. And make sure that you're using every part of the animal when you're eating meat. So that will depend on what meat you're buying and what cut you're buying, but there's really no reason to trim that much off any meat that you're buying. You see people, I don't know, cutting the rind off bacon or cutting the fat off bacon, but then they'll eat pork crackling. That never made sense to me. Eat your bacon rind. Delicious. Here is an example of just how economical it is to buy whole chicken. This is one of the cheapest ways that you can buy meat, is buying whole chicken. And this you can do by buying a barbecue chook if you want. Still really, really economical. But if you do have an oven and it's pretty easy to cook a roast chook if you have an oven, you can get a lot of meals off one chicken. So here, for example, 2 breasts, depending on the size of the chicken, generally 4 serves, 2 drums and 2 wings, 2 serves, 2 thighs, 2 serves, scraps in the frame. You can generally get a lot of chicken scraps off a chicken. So I've said 2 to 4 serves there, plus the stock that you're making with the frame as well. So from that, you can see a 2 kilo chicken, 200 grams is about, that's a very reasonable serve when it comes to meat. So you're getting 10 meals for $15, $1.50 per 200 gram serve. 10 meals from one chicken. Just showing you, you know, that's one of the best things that you can do is buy a whole chicken and cook it down if you're a meat eater. Another really useful thing is to have a lot of recipes up your sleeve that use leftover foods, leftover veggies or scraps or that kind of thing. So just having some regular recipes in mind, in your arsenal that you can use for using things up. I generally like to, you know, maybe you have a designated day in the week, say Friday, something like that. That's a use it up day. So whatever you've got left in your fridge before you go grocery shopping on the weekend or whatever day it is, you're trying to use up absolutely everything before you get a new load of stuff in. Okonomiyaki is a really good recipe for this. It's a Japanese savory pancake. If you've never had it, it's delicious. Usually cabbage based. So finely sliced cabbage. But it's kind of like a fritter. So you can put, you know, grated carrot in there. You can put zucchini. Zucchini slice is another great one for this. Yeah. A little less adventurous, or a frittata. Pretty much any veggies can go in a frittata. You can put in your scraps from your chicken, ham, anything like that, eggs, roast veg, raw veg, chuck it in with some eggs and bake it. Soup is another great one. We are kind of getting into winter slowly. It's still very warm, but over winter, soup is a great one because you can basically throw any vegetables that you have, any meat, use up your stock. You can also be adding pulses like minestrone. You know, you can be adding your chickpeas or your lentils or that kind of thing, or pasta or rice, anything into your broth that you've made with those odds and ends from your carrots and your onions that you've got in your freezer. Fried rice, this is another kind of a rule that I have in my life, that I always cook twice as much rice as I need. And that will generally be because of having leftovers, but also if you don't have leftovers of your other thing, your curry or your stir fry or whatever you made, you can always make fried rice. And with fried rice, you have to have day old rice because it acts the best when it's a little bit dried out. And fried rice is great for using up whatever is in your fridge. Whether you've got onion, spring onion, you know, grated carrot in there, grated zucchini. Also chuck your chicken scraps in here. or you might have bacon. You know, I generally always have bacon bits in my freezer, because I'll cut up, you know, leftover bacon, or bulk buy bacon is really cheap. Chop some up into Ziploc bags of bacon bits, and then you've always got something to throw in the fried rice, or crack an egg in there. Really easy to kind of throw whatever you've got in there with some sauces and make a really delicious meal. Panzanella salad is another one of my absolute favorite dishes. If you've never made this, I would highly recommend it, especially in summer if you've got a lot of tomatoes. If you've got some bread going stale, cut it into cubes. You basically make like big croutons, and then roast some tomatoes and stir it through, maybe some red onion. Would highly recommend looking up a panzanella salad recipe, because it has no right to be as delicious as it is. It does get to a point sometimes when things are a bit too sad, you've let them go a little bit too long and they're beyond a frittata even. You can still prevent those things from going in the landfill bin. If it's just wilting and it's just a textural issue, you can blitz wilting fruit and veg into a smoothie, or you can freeze it in a Ziploc bag before it goes too sad, and then blitz it when it's frozen. You can add your wilting veg into your stock bag as well. You know, celery gets to a point where it's either too droopy or it's gone too tough and chewy that it's like not great for eating as fresh celery. Chuck that in your stock bag, don't throw it waste. You can feed sad fruit and veg to your animals as well. I've personally got 3 goats and sheep and a dog. So depending on what it is, I can feed them to my animals. A lot of people have chooks that are very grateful for a lot of the food scraps. DIY beauty products, you can use things like avocados that, you know, you've opened an avocado, it's a bit disappointing, it's half brown, or it's, you know, just gone too mushy or something like that. You can make a face mask or a hair mask out of it. Lots of different things that you can do there. Coffee grounds, turning them into body scrubs. Actually, one of the things that I do, another thing that I do religiously, is when I wash my rice, I drain the rice water into a jar and use that as a hair conditioner when I have my shower. I don't know if it works, but it's a really classic Korean beauty treatment. So that rice water is used in some Asian countries for its making your hair shiny properties, and it's something that I would otherwise just throw down the drain. So I feel good when I do it, whether it's working or not. So a lot of things that you can do with waste products from food, and also compost the rest. Obviously, hopefully you have a compost at home. If you don't, there are places that you can take it. Food is Free, Green Space, the community gardens. There's a lot of things that you can do, even if you don't have the ability to have compost, whether you live in an apartment or something else. There's a lot of places that you can take it. And we will be getting FOGO bins in Ballarat, I believe before the end of the year. So when that's rolled out, you will be able to put your food scraps in your green bin, and they will be commercially composted by the council, hopefully turned into soil and compost that then put on our gardens around town. It's really important to talk about the difference between best before and used by, and what those terms mean. Because if you're not familiar with the meaning, it can lead to people throwing out a lot of perfectly good food. So best before literally means that it's best before a certain date. Doesn't mean that it's poisonous or bad after that date. Generally, what it means is that it will lose some quality. So whether that's losing strength of flavor, so for example, spices, they might get blander over time. It may change texture. So for example, when I ran my snack food business, my energy bars would just get a little bit drier and harder over time. They were still totally fine to eat, but when they were fresh, they were really soft and fudgy. And then over, I think the best before was a year. At the end of that year, they would be much harder and drier. I just put them in the microwave to soften them again. The other thing is it could get softer. So if you think of things that are supposed to be hard, like crackers or biscuits, they could soften over time. Still be perfectly safe to eat, totally fine, but it's just not the optimum texture. Or they also might clump together. Sometimes when you get salt or spices, or certain pantry items, after a certain amount of time, they might clump. Brown sugar is a classic one for this. Totally fine to use, but it's just a bit annoying because you have to, especially if you're baking, you might have to sieve it or something like that. Generally, products that have a best before can be stored for longer if they're chilled or frozen, or sometimes if you store them in a particular way. So one trick that I've heard is putting a marshmallow in with your brown sugar stops it from going hard. I think because the marshmallow absorbs the moisture in the packet. So there's a few funny things like that where you may actually be able to extend the best before, depending on how you store it. Compare that to a use by. A use by, again, it literally means it must be used by this date. It generally means safe until this date. So in this category, you'll find dairy, meat, milk, those kind of things that have a really hard line that it's not safe past this date. And it is important to note that they're not always accurate. Generally, shops tend to be quite conservative. So sometimes it'll be fine past this date, maybe by a day or two. My chicken yesterday was within date and it definitely was not fine. So use your senses, smell, does it smell a bit ammonia like, especially with meat? Does it look a bit off color? Packets that have puffed are a real sign that bacteria is growing, because as the bacteria is multiplying, it's actually creating oxygen. So if you ever see a packet of meat, all the other ones are nice and flat, or it may be vacuumed in a little bit, and then there's one that's puffy, I would not be picking that up off the shelf, even if it was well within date, because that's a sign that something has gone wrong. I find that cheese, yogurt, and butter actually last longer than they're used by. Butter by quite a lot, generally. Cheese, especially if it's hard cheese, you'll know when it goes bad, because mold will grow, and until that happens, it's fine. Yogurt, if you get plain unflavored yogurt, that lasts indefinitely unless you introduce a contaminant. So if you use a spoon for something and then put it in your yogurt, you're introducing contaminants into that yogurt. So for me, I just always try and use a very clean spoon for things like yogurt, sour cream, cream, anything like that. Because if you keep it clean and uncontaminated, they often last for a really long time. And the reason that they last is because they have their own bacteria. So yogurt has heaps of bacteria. It's good bacteria. It's bacteria that's good for us, and it will actually keep bad bacteria away, keep bad bacteria from growing, because it's its own territory, if you know what I mean. So things like cheese, yogurt, sour cream, cream, they can last a long time before they're used by, as long as you keep it clean. And a lot of these foods can also be stored for longer frozen. So obviously if you buy a packet of mince and put it straight in the freezer, that use by is no longer relevant. It could last for months in the freezer. So it's really important to know the difference between those two terms. and also know that they're kind of usually guessing. So it's always important to use your own senses: sight, smell, taste, maybe not taste, texture, all of those kinds of things. Use your own intuition, and if in doubt, chuck it out. There's no point getting sick from something. But a lot of the time, foods are safer more often than not. Storage is our next big tip. Number 3, storing is really important. Preserving excess. So when you're not using the whole of something, or you're buying in bulk, maybe you've got a big bulk pack of cucumbers, or you've grown too many in your garden, turning them into pickles rather than just having this glut of fresh produce that's slowly going bad. It's very easy to preserve things in multiple different ways. You can make a really, really quick pickling liquid just using vinegar and salt, or salt brine. Turning fruit into jam or cordial with sugar and lemon. You can get a bit more complicated, making your own kimchi or kraut, chutneys, hot sauces. That's a little bit more advanced, I guess. If you have a dehydrator, you can dehydrate fruits, veggies, and herbs. Or you can also, if you get often what you can buy herbs in, the quantities that you buy herbs in are way too much to use for one meal or even a couple of meals. So you can chop up the rest of the herbs and mix them in with oil or butter, and freeze them and store them that way as well. There's also the just storing your fresh fruit and veg. There's a lot of different ways to store them. Storing strawberries in an airtight jar, this trick is amazing. I've tried it myself. It works so good, and not just for strawberries, but also for other fruits, cherries and blueberries and that kind of thing. You don't want them to be wet when they go in the jar. So even storing them, depending how you buy them, storing them without washing them can also make them last longer. Storing them in an airtight jar. I've had strawberries last for literally a month or over a month doing this trick. So try it for yourself, because it really, really works. Wrapping celery in foil before you put it in the fridge, that keeps it crisp. Or another way that I store celery, especially if I get a whole head of celery, it often doesn't fit in the fridge. I put it in a dish of water, and it keeps it nice and firm and crisp. You don't have to be trying to regrow it or anything. It can just be the way that you store it. A lot of things like herbs can be stored in a jar of water or something like that on your bench, and they will stay really nice and fresh. Don't store onions and potatoes together. In fact, try not to store onions with anything else. A lot of people store onions and potatoes together in the bottom of the cupboard because they both like darkness, but onions actually give off a gas that makes potatoes sprout, and makes other fruit and veg ripen and go bad. So try not to store your onions, and I believe garlic is the same, with any of your other fruit and veg, because it will make them go bad faster. The same with bananas. Bananas also give off a gas that ripens fruit. So you may have heard of the tip to put an avocado, if you want it to go ripe, in a brown paper bag with a banana to ripen it. And the opposite is true. If you don't want your other fruit to ripen, don't store bananas in the same fruit bowl, because they will speed up the process. There's also no need to refrigerate tomatoes, avocados, eggplants. A lot of vegetables can actually be stored at room temperature. The only thing I would say about this is when your avocados go soft, or when they're at the right level to eat, then put them in your fridge, because you don't want them to keep getting soft. But if you buy hard avocados and put them in the fridge immediately, they're not going to ripen. So it's going to be very frustrating. And tomatoes just taste way better when they're refrigerated. Freezing is your friend. If you have a big freezer, make the most of it. I've spoken about freezing scraps to make stock. chopping up fruit and veg before it goes bag and storing it in a Ziploc bag. I do this all the time, even things like a head of broccoli. Oh, I'm not going to use it in time, or I'm going away for the weekend, or I've got other meals planned out. Just chop it up and put it in a bag, and then you can chuck it in your fried rice or your curry or whatever it is the following week. And the same with fruit. Anything that you think, oh, actually, I'm not going to use this in time, chop it up, Ziploc bag in your freezer, and you can throw it in something later. Herbs and garlic or butter, I've talked about. Milk, cheese, bread, they can all be frozen. Oftentimes, you might not use a whole loaf of bread, and you know that, and half the loaf of bread always goes moldy. Just start off by keeping it in the freezer. If you're using it for toast, obviously not ideal if you're using it for sandwiches, but if you're toasting bread, it makes no difference whether it's frozen or not. Always label and date everything you put in the freezer. Don't think, I'm going to remember what this is. This is obvious leftovers. This is obvious spag bowl. I couldn't possibly forget what this is. Things look very different when they're frozen, and you cannot smell anything when it's frozen. So you're going to open that container and be like, I have no idea. I have no idea what this is. So always label everything before you put it in the freezer, even if you think you're going to remember what it is, because you're not. I'm telling you right now. Tip 4, grow your own. Obviously, we love growing our own food here on Smart Living. We regularly do sessions on how to grow your own food. So I won't go too much into this section, because we do go into it in greater detail in other Smart Living sessions. A couple of little tips that I wanted to share was, one, don't throw out the ends of your spring onion, because you can actually regrow spring onion from the little nubs that you would normally throw in the compost or your bin. I've done this myself extremely successfully. I still have spring onion growing in my garden that's from 3 years ago, I think, some nubs that I started out on the windowsill until the roots grew, and then put them in the garden. Zero maintenance. I'm actually not that much of a green thumb. Most things I plant die because I forget to water them. But the spring onions have survived my gardening techniques, and they're quite expensive. A bunch of spring onions is $3.50, and I never have to buy them again, and it's grown from the bits that I would normally throw out. You can do the same with celery. I have had success with celery, not huge success. Lettuce, Asian greens, all of them you can put just in a little bit of water and regrow them. Herb plants, I've got a slide on this in a second. These are a no-brainer. Repot your herb plants. Often when you buy herbs, they're in a little pot and they'll die quite quickly. And the reason that they die is because there's too many plants too close together. There'll be 50 basil plants in one little pot, and they choke each other. So what you can do is actually just unpot them, pull them apart into 20, 25 clumps, and repot them, and they'll grow really, really well. I had some basil that lasted, again, I think 3 years from an original basil that I got in a pot. So those pots are $3. Pretty expensive if you only use them for one meal, but if you repot them and reuse them again and again, then there's your basil for 3 years, and you've paid $3 for it. It's suddenly a very different price comparison. And saving seeds. Now, we did a seed saving workshop last year with John Ditchburn. So the recording of that is available for you to watch. Seed is free. Plants go to seed, they drop the seed. And if you can collect that seed and regrow them, you've got an ultimate free food cycle, regenerative. So here's an example of my basil. There's the pot when I bought it. There's, I believe that might be only 2 plants there in the second photo that I split out. I probably split that pot into about 10 plants. Doing really well in the garden. I planted some in a hanging planter in our sunroom to see if I could keep it alive over winter. And I was successful. It stayed alive. That was the one that stayed alive for 3 years. It flowered, it went to seed. Now I am cheating with that last slide. That's not actually basil seedlings coming up because I haven't actually planted the seed because I've still had basil. But that's just an example to show you, plant the seed, you grow it from scratch again. Even if your basil died off over winter, you've got endless lifetime supply of herbs for $3 investment. Tip number 5, eat for free. There are a lot of ways that you can eat for free. I'm going to show you a few of them. The first one is foraging, swapping, trading. Learn about edible weeds. There are so many edible weeds around, probably in your backyard right now. You can go foraging for fruit, herbs, and mushrooms. We've got a lot of pine forests around Ballarat. I have done a mushroom smart living session in the past. So if you look back at past videos, you can find one there to make sure that you're confident in identifying which mushrooms to forage for. My biggest tip is do not pick the ones that look like normal mushrooms. They are the most dangerous ones that you can go for. There are heaps of lookalikes for normal mushrooms that are really poisonous. So don't do this without knowing what you're doing. But once you know a couple of the local ones to identify, saffron milk caps, for example, orange mushroom, bruise green, there are no lookalikes that are poisonous. So you're very safe going and foraging for those around the place. There's some Facebook groups as well that are focused on local foraging. So one local to Ballarat is from basket to plate. And that's people post photos of all sorts of things that they've foraged around the Ballarat area. Lots of fruits, lots of really interesting stuff there. So if you're into that, go join that group to find out more. Volunteer for the Hidden Orchard. The Hidden Orchard is the volunteer group that I run. I'm one of the 4 founding members and the president, and we go around and harvest unwanted fruit from people's backyards and public land and private land, and redistribute it to food relief charities. But the volunteers that conduct the harvest get to take a share of the fruit home. And as you can see, that's a photo from one of our plum harvests. That's just from one tree. The share that you get to take home can usually be between 5 and 10 kilos of fruit, usually for an hour of your time volunteering at the harvest. So that's a really good deal, hard to beat. So that's one option if you're interested in getting out there and doing some harvesting, a way to get free fruit there. Produce swap at Ballarat Community Garden. So that's the first Saturday of every month. They have a produce swap there. So if you have a glut of something, you got too many zucchinis, I mean, good luck, because I think at that time of year, everyone's got too many zucchinis. But you can take your produce there and swap it for other people's different produce. But also, if you don't have anything to take, I believe it's just a gold coin donation. It's very generous. The people at the Ballarat Community Garden, they're very good gardeners and they grow way too much produce. So you can get some really good deals and go get some free, very locally grown fruit and veg for a gold coin donation. Also keep an eye out on the Ballarat Good Karma Network. People are often posting up food for free on that page. Often they've done a pantry clean out, or they'll say, oh, my kids have decided they don't want to eat these snacks, or they don't like these flavors, or I just found out that I'm gluten-free, so I need to get rid of all my pasta, and things like that. All sorts of reasons that people will be doing pantry clean outs. It's not just, food's gone past its best before or anything like that. They might be moving house, all sorts of reasons. Quite often people have posted free food on Ballarat Good Karma Network, so keep an eye out on that page as well. There's also a lot of food relief options in Ballarat. This is not an entire list, but it's just some of the main ones. So salvos, Cafe 102, which is on the corner of Eureka Street and Main Road. They do community meals. They give away food. I believe they do meals every day there. Uniting Breezeway Meals, that's Dana Street, down the bottom of the hill there on the corner. They do lunch every day. I believe it's every day of the year, 365 days of the year. They do a hot lunch, and they also give you a sandwich to take away that you can have for dinner as well. So that's a really great one. Soup Bus, then if you want a hot dinner, we've got Soup Bus that operate here in Ballarat. The Hilltop Church do Friday afternoons, Friday meals. The neighbourhood houses, our kitchen in Sebas, the neighbourhood centre there, also do Friday lunches. I believe it's $10 for a 3-course lunch, and they often have free bread to give away at the same time. So they get donations. There's a lot of bread. If you want free bread, there's a lot of bread going around. Anglicare do community breakfast. Soul Plus Food every Thursday morning do a trolley for $10. So you can go there, pay $10 and basically fill up a trolley of food. St. Vincent do Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings. And then we also have a new food bank in Ballarat as well. So there's a lot of food relief options there, pretty much cover all the meals you could possibly want to cover. And some free, and you might have to be referred to them, or you might have to go and have a chat to them before you access their services, and some paid, and anyone's welcome. There's also at least 4 food pantries in Ballarat. So Food is Free Central, that's the Food is Free green space. It's now the laneway's been moved over to the green space there in Ripon Street. There's also Food is Free in Lygar Street in Ballarat North that have baskets out the front filled with, so Food is Free green space is generally more fruit and veg, not packaged food. Food is Free Lygar Street tends to be more packaged food. Food from Kindness in Sebas, that's that photo there is of the setup at Food from Kindness. They have a lot of packaged food, but also meals. You can see the freezer there. They've got a fridge. They have people making home cooked meals that are available there as well. And there's also a Food is Free table at the Ballarat Community Garden on Dyke Parade. That's fruit and veg that's grown at the garden generally. And also the Hidden Orchard deliver fruit to all 4 of these places. So they're really good places to check, because again, you don't have to go and talk to anyone. You don't have to sign up for anything. They are open 24/7. It's just a lucky dip. You go and see what's there. So now I've got some meal ideas, because if you know me, you know that I love food. So here are just a few of the regular foods that are quite economical. French toast, those are berries. That looks very lush. Those are berries grown at my house, so they were free. Mulberries and blueberries. And then obviously, yeah, French toast, really economical, especially if you've got bread going a little bit stale. Granola and yogurt is one of my absolute go-tos. You can make your own yogurt. It's really easy. So look up some instructions on how to do that. It's really, really easy. I make my own granola as well, which makes it a bit cheaper, because granola does tend to can be a bit more expensive at the supermarkets, but it generally is quite cheap and easy to make. And again, those blueberries are from my garden, so free. Oh, we do have a question online. Laurie asks, do you have any suggestions to keeping carrots for longer? They seem to go off very quickly in our fridge. I find that carrots, if they're stored well, last a really long time, more than a month. But if they're just out in the open, they go black within a couple of days. So if you're buying them in a plastic bag from the supermarket, keep them in that plastic bag. It will trap the moisture in, and they'll keep really well in there. If you're buying them loose, or you're growing your own carrots, I have seen people say to do the jar method. So keep them stored in a jar, but actually fill the jar up with water, so they are sitting in water in the jar. So give those a go, and let me know how you go there, because yeah, when stored well, carrots last for a really, really long time. Porridge, really economical choice. One thing I would say with porridge is try and add some protein in there, because otherwise it doesn't really keep you full for that long. So whether that's adding a big dollop of peanut butter, you can also add an egg. They're called custard oats. It doesn't taste eggy. Don't get scared that it's going to be a bit savory. It changes the texture. It goes a bit custardy. So that's better for when you're doing them on the stove rather than microwave. Microwave could end up with scrambled eggs. But on the stove, stir an egg in. Makes for a really nice texture, keeps you fuller for longer. Or you might want to chuck some protein powder in there, or some seeds or nuts on top, or that kind of thing. But you tend to have to bulk out oats a little bit to make them last for longer. And eggs Benny, not the cheapest thing, but way cheaper than buying it at a cafe. So learning how to cook for yourself at home is always going to pay off in the long run in terms of price. I should have done a price comparison of how much that costs versus how much you can pay at the cafes, but you can probably imagine the difference. Some lunch ideas. Soup is just the best thing to go to in terms of price. And again, we already spoken about generally soup you can make with whatever veg you've got that might be going a bit wilted, or those cheaper kind of root vegetables as well that tend to be much cheaper per kilo. Pumpkin, when it's in season, is so cheap for what you get. The bang for your buck is crazy. And then if you're using your homemade stock that you've made out of scraps, soup is really, really cheap. Great option. Top right there, got a baked potato. I always forget that baked potatoes exist, but they're so delicious and really, really easy. And again, potatoes are really cheap. You can put whatever toppings on that you want. Top left is actually, that's 2-minute noodles. And I'm a sucker for instant noodles or instant ramen. I love instant ramen, but always beef it up a bit. 2-minute noodles by themselves are not going to keep you full. They're not very nutritious. So I like to add an egg, whether that's stirring the egg in or putting a fried egg on top. You can throw some frozen veg in there, that kind of thing. And you can also get bulk packs of unflavored noodles that are way, way cheaper than buying flavored 2-minute noodles. And then you can make your own sauce with a bit of soy sauce, with peanut butter, anything you've got in the pantry as well. That can make it a lot more economical. That's actually homemade kimchi on top as well, and spring onions that I grew out of my scraps. And then the other one there is that's one of the YouTubers that me and my husband watch has this lunch that she eats every single day, and it's rice and beans and eggs like that. So we decided to try it, and it's a delicious combination. Those green beans again are from frozen, so really economical. The rice can be left over from the night before. We've cooked a double batch, and then a couple of eggs on top. I'm not a tuna, I hate tuna, but if you're a tuna person, you could sub the eggs with tuna, a little bit more economical, as we've seen with the protein comparison earlier. But these are just some ideas. And dinner, I love curry. Again, throw whatever veg you want in it. Throw your chicken scraps that you pulled off the frame. Nachos, we eat a lot of nachos at our house. Again, you can get really big packs of plain corn chips that are really cheap. mince, beef mince tends to be really economical. Throw your fresh salad on top and a bit of sour cream. And then, oh, that's my panzanella salad on the right there. That was probably the best thing I've ever made. It might not look like much, but that was absolutely delicious. I had chorizo that I got on special, and some tomatoes, some capsicums, some salad leaves, and some stale bread that I turned into croutons. Stir that all up with the kind of dressing, salt and vinegar, and it's so delicious. And then halal chicken rice that my husband is one of his staples, kind of like a meshbus, Emirati, like biryani chicken with turmeric rice. So those are just some ideas, dinner ideas there, so I couldn't help myself. Giving you some recipe suggestions. Now there's some really great books as well, that these are all available from the Ballarat Library, or that one in the middle there was put together by Ballarat Community Health, Tight Ass Cookbook. They've actually got a new one that came out, might have even been this year or end of last year, called Hot Off the Press, I think it is, and it's all recipes that you can do cooked in a sandwich press. So great for if you don't have cooking facilities. You know, there's a lot you can do with a sandwich press, and they're all really economical as well. Use It All is a really great cookbook. It's all about using every scrap, every peel, all sorts of things in really, really delicious ways. And Good Old Women's Weekly have a Too Good to Waste as well. And that's just some examples. The libraries in Ballarat have quite a few really great books on this topic. So that was all of my tips. Goodness me, I've been talking for a really long time. If you do have any questions on any of that, please write them in the comments. It feels funny not to do this session live where I can get questions from people and get that feedback from people, but yeah, always happy to answer questions in the comments, and hopefully you got a lot out of that session, and a lot of great tips that you can go on with. Next month, as I mentioned, I will not be hosting because I am currently 35 weeks pregnant. So I'm going on mat leave, but Grace Dark will be hosting our next session, which will be a discussion panel on life without a car, talking to real Ballarat locals who either don't have a car or use one very little and not as their main mode of transport. Grace, who regularly volunteers for Smart Living, so a lot of you may know her, she doesn't have a car. She lives in Mount Pleasant, so she has first-hand experience of living in Ballarat with a family, with 2 young kids, without a car. So the panel will also include Robert on the left there and Alice in the middle there as well, who has her social media is Life on a Cargo Bike, if you want to look her up prior to the session. And we'll also feature Ben Lever, another local. So it's going to be less of a presentation and more of a discussion. You can ask them questions about what it's like to live in Ballarat and to use a bike as their main mode of transport. It's going to be a really, really interesting discussion. So I hope you join us for that one. Behind my head, you can see that's the April session. May is then a tour of the Repair Cafe at Berkeley Square. June is a session of Nature Stewards, which is hosting again with Julie White. And then July, I will hopefully be back in action and taking the induction stovetop demo, which will be at the community kitchen in Berkeley Square. So I hope you've enjoyed that session and gotten a lot out of it. Thank you again so much for joining us, and we will see you next month.